Welcome, everyone. This is Mr. Simone. I'm here to give you a kind of a brief overview of the economic issues that the United States was dealing with during the late 1800s. And this will allow us to then go deeper into the discussion with activities in class. So, why are the late 1800s referred to as the Gilded Age in American history? Well, the author Mark Twain was the person who coined this phrase. And what he's basically describing is what he believes to be an increasing gap between the rich and the poor. So on the outside, it appeared that everything was gilded in gold. However, on the inside, there was tremendous poverty. So what he's referring to is this gap between the rich and the poor that was taking place during the late 1800s. Anything from post-Civil War, 1865, to around 1900 would be appropriate for this time period. Okay, oh, sorry, that's a mistake. All right, so what are all the important topics related to economic history during this Gilded Age? I'm going to have a slide for each of these. But what is basically happening in the United States is we are industrializing, and the growth of railroads is contributing to that industrialization. There is an age of inventions, the growth of monopolies, which is businesses that stifled competition during this time period. You're going to see the rise of very wealthy big businessmen during the late 1800s. The government primarily held a laissez-faire policy toward regulation. That means when the government keeps hands off of business, very limited role in the economy. Labor unions are going to form, mostly because of the poor working conditions. Urbanization is the growth of cities. And then I am going to also focus tremendously on the rise of a new political party that emerged. It's called the Populist Party, that emerged during this time of the settlement of the West. But the Populist Party is really going to be a combination of farmers and workers. So let's just go through these. Industrialization. There is an early era of industrialization prior to the Civil War. That's when I talked about early factories, the Lowell system in Massachusetts. But we're really now focusing on the second industrial revolution in America, where it's going to be primarily regarding steel, oil, electricity, and new machinery. That early era of industrialization really focused more on just making clothing. So this is definitely one aspect of the late 1800s. And that is George Springer. I don't know how he got in there. All right, then the growth of railroads is something that historians believe is one of the key factors that contributed to all of these economic changes. Hopefully you all remember the Henry Clay, the great compromiser, who focused on railroads early in American history. But the first time we complete a railroad from one end of the continent to another was in Promontory Point, Utah. This is an actual location where the Golden Spike was put into the ground on May 10th, 1869. They connected the Union Pacific and the Central Pacific Railroads, again in Promontory Point, Utah. And that's going to lead to several other transcontinental railroads being completed all throughout the late 1800s. 3 alone were completed by 1883. This is also when they developed standard time zones in America. We created 4 time zones. This made it a lot easier for the railroads to be able to communicate trade and transportation during this time. Please be aware that the government did give the railroad companies the best land to build the railroads, and in return, the members of the government got free passes on the railroads. All right, next is the Age of Inventions. And you're going to see people like Samuel B. Morse. That should not say typewriter, that should say telegraph. I apologize. Alexander Graham Bell, who invented the telephone. You're going to see a cash register, an adding machine, camera. Camera was Kodak, by the way. Safety razor was Gillette. But Thomas Edison is probably the most noticeable figure during this time. This is Thomas Edison at his Menlo Park laboratory, where he just did a host of different inventions, completed many different inventions during this time period. All right, now the growth of monopolies, do not underestimate the importance of this. Laissez-faire capitalism was rooted in the beliefs way back in 1776 when Adam Smith wrote The Wealth of Nations. This is the belief that the business should be left free, that government should keep its hands out of industry. And this was a primary factor during the late 1800s. There was this belief in social Darwinism. In science class, you may have learned about Charles Darwin, survival of the fittest. Well, the belief in social Darwinism is that the same thing could apply to businesses. The strongest ones are the ones that are going to survive, and that will benefit everybody else. If we allow business to prosper, it will trickle down to the masses. So these two views, laissez-faire capitalism and social Darwinism, are critical to the growth of monopolies. Okay, oops, sorry, I don't know how that got in there. All right, now who's going to benefit from all of this? This would be the big business tycoons of the era. You will see people Cornelius Vanderbilt, Andrew Carnegie, John D. Rockefeller, and J.P. Morgan, who all made tremendous fortunes. This slide calls them captains of industry. There are some who would be critical of their work and call them robber barons. I think it's very important to note they did not break any laws as they amassed these tremendous fortunes. Vanderbilt mostly in the railroads, Carnegie in steel, Rockefeller in the oil industry, and J.P. Morgan in banking. So there just weren't any laws to break. I will talk about these men in class so you have a little bit more detail about what they achieved. All right. Now, because of all the factors above, working conditions, as you can see here, child labor, working conditions suffered during the late 1800s, again, mostly because there were no regulations. So groups are going to form labor unions. Some of those labor unions will include all workers. Some of these labor unions will be very specific. I put some here, National Labor Union, the Knights of Labor, and there are going to be strikes that are going to take place during this era. Some of these strikes are peaceful, others turn into riots. You will learn about them in class. All right, please don't underestimate the growth of cities and the increase in immigration during this time period. You will see Ellis Island as a location on the East Coast and Angel Island as a location on the West Coast for immigrants to come to. Many immigrants will first migrate to the urban areas and live with similar people of similar nationalities, just more job opportunities at this time. Unfortunately, the living conditions deteriorated. There would be tenements where immigrants are trapped in very close quarters. But this is all developing during this time period. And then we have the rise of the Populist Party. This is a party that's going to emerge in response to people's feelings that the Democrats and Republicans didn't really address their concerns. So you will learn about farmers and how they were upset with the government. You will also learn about how workers in factories were upset with the government, and they will both gravitate toward this candidate, William Jennings Bryan, who will form the Populist Party. So I hope that, do not know how that got in there. So I hope that I believe I covered all of these topics here. This just gives you a general overview of the late 1800s, and that will allow me to dig deeper as I teach all of these topics in class. So I hope that was very clear and quick. I'm sorry I didn't give you any AP Euro shout outs. I'm doing this during parent-teacher conferences and just wanted to get it done before you went to bed tonight. All right, have a great day, and I will see you in school on Wednesday.